and welcome to GMBN Tech Ask, where you've used hashtag Ask GMBN Tech down in the comments of our videos, and we pick up those questions and answer them in a show like this. So let's get started. Drew Felix here says, can you put too much sealant in a tyre? I mean, yes and no. You can put loads of sealant in there. Whether it would be good for you or not is another question. Obviously, the more sealant you put in there, the more weight you will get. But also, if you have loads in there, it's just going to slosh around, especially when you're going at slow speeds or maybe when you stop, it'll slosh around. In terms of performance, it won't change it, if that's why you're wondering. It won't perform better or worse if you have loads in there. I think check your manufacturer's spec and stick to what they recommend. And it's important to consider that actually you do require different amounts of sealant depending on how big your wheel size is, how big your tyres are, how wide they are, and your manufacturer will tell you what the recommended amount is, and I would stick with that. Sometimes I might put a little bit extra in for brand new tyres, just so it seals up and then still has that sort of recommended amount slosh around in the bottom. But I wouldn't really recommend going over it. Also, do bear in mind that this sealant usually has a lifespan as well. So you might want to replace it or refresh it. Usually it's about 6 months. Do check your manufacturer's recommendations. But if you're going to put a whole tyre's worth of sealant in there, do you want to be replacing that every 6 months as it starts to get contaminated and dry out? Probably not. So Antoine Chalons says, can this new Eagle AXS be fitted on any bike or only on bikes that are compatible with UDH? I have an old Willier 2014 with the previous AXS X01 rear derailleur. Loving it. Can I upgrade? Short answer, no. So the new AXS Eagle drivetrain for 2023, which we've just talked about recently on our shows, is direct mount. And the previous UDH, which was launched in 2019, was almost a bit of a Trojan horse in that it was launched to ready the frames and the market for the new direct mount derailleur. And it works in a similar way in that it goes through your axle. So your 2014 Willier was made way before UDH even came into place. So the frame has to be UDH compatible in order for that axis to run. So I'm afraid not. But you said you were loving it. So why change? Why upgrade if it's good? Which Way says, I have serviced my dropper post a couple of times with the help of your past videos, so many thanks. And this usually improves performance. However, I find that I still have to apply some slight pressure to the saddle in order to make it extend. Am I missing a trick? Possibly. So first up, check that if you've undone the collar at all, check that that's torqued correctly. If it's over torqued, it might be over tight. It might make it sort of almost sticky and not being able to extend properly. Also check if there is an air valve. So some droppers take air and often that valve is hidden underneath the saddle. So you actually have to take the saddle and the little seat rail off, and there will be a valve under there. Find out what the pressure is. It often is quite a lot, and if that pressure has gone down, then it's not going to extend very well. If you've done those two things and it's still not working too well, then something else is going on. Perhaps something needs replacing, like the cartridge needs replacing. I don't think we've done a video on that. It's quite complicated. So you might want to take it to a suspension specialist or a bike shop that does services for droppers, and they will be able to look at what parts need replacing, and if they can be replaced, they will do it. So Slide Drexler says, hi Doddy and Anna, I recently upgraded to a Fox fork and was told to have it serviced every 50 hours of riding. Does the 50 hours include the riding I do to get from our home to our local trails and back, or just the time I spend riding the trails? So, I mean, technically it's all riding, but really it's that it is kind of the trail riding when you're actually using your forks. I mean, riding on the road won't really put that much stress on your suspension. It won't use it too much. So you could count just the riding on trails part, but of course you do kind of activate your suspension when riding on the roads too. So it's a sort of yes and no. If you do a lot of road riding on your bike, it might be that you can go a little bit over the 50, but yeah, I would get a bit of a balancing act between the amount that you're on the trails and the overall amount. Somewhere in the middle is probably a safe bet, because generally when things start to wear and need a service, say like with your forks, might need a lower service to change the oil, you generally don't notice when it's time because it happens so gradually. So it's good to check over 50 hours anyway, because you just never know. You don't want to go too far. So Arc 1980 says, "Hi team, is it okay to drill a large hole to fit a tubeless Schrader valve in an alloy rim? If so, what sizes should it be, assuming that I will need a hole larger than the valve inside for the rubber bung or the valve compared to the outside? Also, is there a reason I should keep using Presta valves? They seem to give me trouble, whereas my kids' bikes that run tubeless Schrader never given me problems." It is possible to drill rims, although I wouldn't recommend it. Certainly drilling anything may weaken it. Certainly alloy is not something you want to weaken. So there is that to consider, especially if you're doing sort of aggressive riding or trail or enduro, but offer up the drill bit to the valve to check the correct diameter. And you'll need the Schrader valve with the collar and the lock ring as well, in order to, well, you're going to have to get a full Schrader kit to change that. Presta valves, why you should keep it? I mean, there's no reason to keep it. But I wonder what trouble you're experiencing with Presta valves. If you're using sealant and it's gunking up your Presta valves, then maybe buy a box of cores instead, where you can just take the core out of the valve and replace them instead of buying whole new valves. And maybe that's the issue. Usually you can take them out and, you know, take that gunk out and give them a good clean if you don't want to buy a box of parts. Alternatively, why not try looking for a Presta fit valve that is slightly different to your common valves? So Reserve Wheels brought out their own version, which is it's called Fillmore, so the Reserve Fillmore valves, and they have a very different system. You don't even open the top part, you don't open that. It's not like a conventional core, and it is a much bigger opening, so it takes a lot of volume of air, and it releases a lot of volume of air. But also in doing that, the bigger opening means that you don't tend to get much clogging from sealant. So maybe try that before drilling some holes in your rims. Gospodin Kenobi says, "Hi there, I bought thick grips and now I struggle to put a thumb on a shifter because of the tight clearance between the grip and the lever. Is it possible to increase the distance between the two?" Yeah, absolutely. So depending on what system you have, some people have their brake lever and their shifter on two separate clamps, and then you can effectively just loosen the clamp of the shifter and move it away from the grip. Or you can rotate it to get the lever away underneath your handlebars instead. If you have something like iSpec or Matchmaker, which is the system that SRAM and Shimano use, or even Magiri use this kind of system as well, where your shifter is attached to the brake clamp, a lot of the time they're on a rail. If you look underneath, you will see that often there's a bolt which attaches the shift body, and sometimes they're on a rail, so you can actually move that shifter away. Sometimes you can move them as well underneath. If you can't do that with your system, you might want to think about getting an adapter that can do that. I think Wolf Tooth make a lot of different adapters for matchmaking things, but also maybe even consider buying the original clamp so that you can separate the brake and the shifter, and then you can move that independently of itself away from, well, wherever you want it to be. Cool, well that's all I've got time for today, but thank you for watching, and if you have any questions of your own, just use hashtag Ask GMBN Tech down in the comments of any video and we will try and get back to you.